I went into early labor with my first child when I was 20 years old. After 4 trying days, I was given an episiotomy, during which I lost a lot of blood. It was decided to begin a blood transfusion 2 days after my daughter was born. I felt the urge to go to the restroom around 2 hours into the transfusion and dragged myself up, dragging the blood bag alongside me. I'd never felt so weak and floaty before or after this event. Moving took a lot of effort. I shuffled back from the toilet to the ward and laid down slowly and cautiously. Except for one other new mother who laid opposite me, the ward was deserted. I smiled at her before realizing I was shaking. I'd always been cold, so I believed I just needed to warm up at the time. When I tried to sleep still for a bit, I realized my entire body was shaking. The woman next to me inquired as to my well-being. I attempted to convince her that I was fine and that I was just cold, but my teeth were chattering and my jaw was too rigid to manage. Instead, I nodded, still puzzled as to why I was trembling. I reached for my buzzer to get an extra blanket from a midwife. As soon as she noticed me, she pressed a button behind me, and I was surrounded in a matter of seconds. The transfusion was halted immediately. I noticed the woman across from me staring at me. I was strongly aware of her fear and the veil being drawn around her. I wanted to inquire what was going on, but I couldn't open my mouth to speak, and an oxygen mask was placed on my face practically instantly. I recalled struggling for air. I recall how hard my chest thumped. My thoughts appeared confused, my eyes frenzied, and as I noticed my fingernails becoming blue, I calmly thought to myself, "Oh, I'm dying." It was straightforward, with a tinge of oops. Internally, I attempted to remain cool. I was talking to myself in my head, thinking of my family and attempting to gain strength from them. I recall being upset and annoyed that they weren't with me and that I couldn't say goodbye to them. I attempted to keep my eyes open, but became really tired. My eyelids were heavy, so I rested them before getting up. I hovered briefly over my newborn kid, hoping she'd remember me. And then I was gone. I felt like I was shooting into a tunnel with no sights visible. It was dark, yet well lit. I wasn't the only one. I was aware of a presence around me. I was tumbling forward and upward at an incredible rate. It felt like wind all over me, inside of me. At the time, I compared it to being on a roller coaster, that rushing sensation. It was fantastic. I felt so light and liberated. Simultaneously, I experienced this fully and watched myself enjoy it from a safe distance. If I focus on the recollection, I can still see myself plummeting. This trip continued for a while until I became aware that I was in a different location, like a chamber with no walls, no roof, and no floor. I had full 360-degree eyesight and could see everything around me. There was darkness once more, but I was not terrified. I sensed a presence once more, as well as complete trust in this firm. For want of a better term, a movie began to play. It was big and black and white. It seemed as if I were staring at a massive screen that encompassed every direction I turned. The movie was my entire life, from birth to death, every minute and every incident. I watched it again and again. It was at this point that I realized time no longer appeared to me in the same way it had in my body. It seemed as if I'd been projected into a specific instant or dragged through time, backwards before forwards, to re-experience it. At this point, I witnessed the sexual assault I had undergone and buried as a small child, as well as out-of-body experiences I was having at the time and at night while resting in my bed. I remembered seeing myself floating out of my body. At this point, I saw and remembered a guide who had been with me throughout my development. While re-watching or re-experiencing each occasion, I discovered that I could now experience each occurrence through the emotions of everyone who was present at the time. I watched my own blunders and learned from each reenactment. I saw myself as a child, bitten by a guinea pig, and half launching it onto the sofa in shock. At the moment, I felt ashamed. Because I was terrified of the guinea pig, I was asked what I had discovered. At this point, I felt relieved, comforted, and reassured I'd learned so much. What a great impact my seemingly insignificant activities made on a grand scale. How my decisions and actions affected the lives of countless people. The way my love spread like flames, my mistreatment of others truly wounded and affected them, as well as how that anguish, fear, and bewilderment impacted the lives of others. I gained a deep gratitude for numerous things during the time I spent reminiscing. For one thing, the experience of life, people and souls who have affected my spirit in amazing ways, as well as the fragility of being human. My acquired wisdom seemed adequate, and we were on our way. We traveled into the lit darkness once more, until I noticed a pinpoint of light in the distance. It was like seeing a memory when I saw it. I knew where I was going, and was eager to get there. I'm not sure if I was pulling myself towards it, or being drawn to it, but it was a need or desire within me. We were getting closer and closer to this beam of light. It expanded in size and intensity in my vision. I had the sensation of flying. We jumped right in, and it was beyond words. It was a fantastic feeling that I will never forget. There was an immediate sense of calm, perfect, total peace within me. There was no pain, no fear, and no sense of shame. I felt totally accepted, completely whole and adored, beyond comprehension loved. I am completely loved. I was loved like I'd never been loved before, loved with the purest love possible. I felt at home. I had the impression that I was familiar with this location, space, or being. It was breezy. It took over all available place in my 360-degree vision. It had no form that I recall, which left me with further questions for a long time, but it was beautiful and not at all dazzling. It was as if I'd merged with the light, which had consumed me. I learned a lot throughout these times about our existence as humans, our planet, and what we as a species must do to fix its problems, and the healing that our planet and we as people require. I was both conversing with and experiencing being within the light. A conversation ensued, presumably by telepathy, and I was asked if I wanted to return. The actual truth of my spirit is that I was deeply offended by this question. I was frightened by the concept and responded loudly within myself, "No." There was a brief delay, and I was perplexed as to why this was being asked of me. "Do you want to go back?" I asked myself again and again. "No," I answered once more. After another brief delay, I was shown the baby I had just delivered, resting in the crib next to my body. Much of the future was shown to me. Whether I returned to my body determined the outcome. If I returned, countless lives would be impacted by this love, and many would not know if I did not. I recall letting out what can only be described as a deep, profound sigh, a sigh of relief, a comprehension. I replied yes immediately after viewing this and picturing my newborn daughter and her prospective future if I stayed. I requested another moment and was allowed it. I poured all of my love into my entire existence. It felt fantastic. I felt pure, light, entire and loved, adored. Everything became clear to me during this moment. Creation, meaning and love, numbers, physics and existence. I was absolutely one with everything. I was shooting backwards. It was chilly and dark, and I was mourning the light before I even touched my body. I couldn't hold my baby for another 2 days. I was in and out of consciousness for 48 hours while lying naked as the day I was born. I couldn't say anything. I just lay there quietly crying. I was in pain everywhere. I was stuck, constrained, and lonely. I quickly and profoundly missed the brightness, the affection. My spirit took longer to recuperate than my body, and that was a long time. For many years, I was miserable and had suicidal thoughts because the yearning to be home was so strong. For the longest time, I was perplexed. I was terrified. Being in a body was unpleasant, constraining, and limiting for me. It still makes me very uneasy. However, I've learned to appreciate and be thankful for my life and breath. Many parts seemed to fit into place in my mind when I was at my father's bedside when he died 7 years after my NDE. I began to force myself to recover quickly from sexual abuse, the death of my best friend, my father, and the agonizing loss of light. At this point, I remembered my mission. Over the next 6 years, I developed a network of over 700,000 people who had survived sexual assault, trauma, addiction, and grief by starting an online community called Bruised But Not Broken. We work together to heal our wounds and aspire to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. I've also written and published 2 novels since then. The first is about my sexual assault and healing, while the second is about my near-death experience and time spent with the light and my higher self. Conversations with my higher self, and a sparrow stirs its wings. Without a doubt, my NDE was the most remarkable and transforming event of my life. I've never forgotten a single thing about it, and I doubt I ever will. It took time, but I let it shape me in the most beautiful way, and I try every day to live and love the way I was loved in those very holy moments